Hey there. So, in the last couple of videos, we've talked about churchianity, what I would call churchianity. Um, and I don't like to dwell too much on the problem and the negative, just because I feel like that can be a little bit alarmist and we could get to doing things more from fear than we can faith. So that was the objective of the last video, was that of faith. And my cat wants to get my attention. As you know, in the first video, my cat seems to rule my roost a little bit. Anyway, so the origin story, everything has an origin story, doesn't it? We as individuals, as people, have origin stories. And I got the privilege of helping one of my friends a few years ago write his memoir at 105 or 6 years old. He did pass away since, but he led a very good and productive life. If you'd like to check out his book, it's Flaming Arrow. It's on Amazon by Richard Blomquist. Anyway, just I don't get any proceeds from that. I just had a lot of fun helping him put that together. Anyway, yes, we have origin stories, and they're fun to look at, whether it be from Star Wars or to a Marvel superhero, until they become convoluted. Any of you have followed the Star Wars prequels and postquels and all that. I don't know if you've lost track, but I definitely have. I don't know who's what, where, when, and why. And so I think we can go too much into endless genealogies. There's a scripture warning of that. And I think it's Timothy, Christian scriptures, by the way. And so we want to be careful. I'm less polite because the term comes to me, mental masturbation, with some of these origin stories and these templates. But it's not to say that there's not some benefit looking at the structures behind things like archetypes and metaphors. And, I've studied some Joseph Campbell, I've studied some Ken Wilber, and definitely some benefit to their insights. But yeah, I think it's a slippery slope, right? So we're going to be talking about the origin story here, really of faith. And that is, where does faith come from? What is it about? So if we look in the beginning of the Jewish scriptures, which are also the beginning of the Christian scriptures, the book of Genesis, we have this mythic or this creation story, right? And many cultures have creation stories. What comes to mind is Gilgamesh, and others around the world from different tribes, and they're very interesting. I found the Christian or Hebrew version pretty insightful, and still do. I don't feel comfortable resting in an original fall like is kind of seen. And I haven't read enough of rabbinical stuff to really say if I agree with some of their thoughts. I'm sure I would, and I'm sure. But I have a good Jewish friend in Santa Fe, New Mexico. He's not a practicing Jew, but he grew up Jewish. So, and we've talked a little bit about this, this fall, and how, apparently somebody ate an apple and then somebody gave it to somebody else. But there is something deeper in there, isn't there? There's a layer of, was God hiding behind a tree when this happened? And, was he off taking a smoke break? I'm a big fan of Mark Russell's God is Disappointed in You. It's kind of a paraphrase of sorts. He's also wrote a comic book called Billionaire Island and Second Coming, which I don't know about the former, but the latter I'm really starting to enjoy because he's touching on some of what I would say the Gnostic issues, gnosis, meaning not knowledge, head knowledge, but knowledge that comes from experience or that which we resonate with. It's more of an artistic thing, like I feel this, I got this vibe, right? So so this origin story has to do with a fall, but I would say it's a fall from togetherness, a fall from seeing that we're all in this boat and we're all in it together. I hate to be so trite, but some people bandy that, and it's not it's not workable. But it is workable when we start to see where it fell apart. And the way it fell apart, or where it kind of disperses, is really in the Cain and Abel story. If you're not familiar with that story, pick up a Bible, go look for it online, Google, whatever. But basically, Cain killed his brother Abel over kind of a jealousy, but kind of almost like the Adam and Eve thing. It's just like, who was at fault, Adam or Eve? Of course, the feminists will say the male, and the misogynists will say the female, right? But who was it really? Who, because I feel, even though Cain killed Abel, I feel like he was set up. I mean, why did God approve Abel's sacrifice and not Cain's? This unconditional loving God, so I feel a setup here, and I'm not afraid to say that because I don't believe in the literalness of these scriptures. Just like if, I've one of the biggest parts I have a problem with really is in the book of Acts, where there's this couple that supposedly lie against the Holy Spirit and they're killed, they die instantly. And I'm like, ooh, that's harsh. So it's not just Christians I have trouble with. It's some of these texts, and I'm like, but it's not enough to shake my faith in God and that He is an all-loving God. It's just that His ways are beyond my ways, and I'm not just justifying bad behavior by that. There is an understanding that I think brings this together, and that's something that I'm always struggling with in my faith and in my life. And I notice as I struggle with it in a good way, kind of like there's stress and then there's tension. I spent some time as a yoga teacher, and it's like, man, yeah, there's tension. There's good tension, but a lot of it is mental. And that's where this comes down to with what we're talking about today. The Cain and Abel thing is mental. Basically, it's a separation game. This is the true fall, the falling into a separation game, that you and I are separate. We are separate from these. And, that's them and this is us. And that's where that's where the slippery slope really begins. And as we start to kind of realize where we can collaborate, where we overlap, as believers in whatever faith we believe in, or whatever thought construct we like or attracted to, right? Our origin story is about us coming into something wondrous and simple. As the Christian scriptures talk about, coming into that childlike innocence, but yet also having maturity. I feel like some Christianity is really childish. Like I was reading in Mark Russell's little distillation of the book of Amos from the Hebrew Bible, and he was saying that, do you think God really cares about your hymns? And I mean, you have to read the context. It's far funnier. It doesn't sound funny at all. But the context of what does our faith mean? Something that I feel in my origin story is that I was pretty much raised by my mom and my stepdad, who was not a good person. I wouldn't say he was an evil person. I used to think he was evil, um, but I think he was just yeah. There was stuff going on there, right? But the biggest detriment, even from that time period and beyond, was just how neither my culture, my church, um, my teachers, nobody emphasized values. And so, and I went to a Christian school for quite a while, and and I went to regular high school. But I feel, and even into my 20s, into my early marriage, I was in the military, and all of these things. I mean, I did kind of look for some role models. So I guess on my part, I did something, but I was kind of an artsy kid and adult. I'm a very individualistic thinker. I've studied a lot just randomly and had fun. But I really, especially since getting into my 50s, I really kind of want to make some juice out of this, for others, and really put my boots on the ground, so to speak. So, yeah, and I really think that the origin story is about not just kind of navel gazing and kind of getting enamored or getting lost in your past, but it's more about what is the trajectory of yours and humanity's future, and what part are you playing. I mean, that's difficult in this day and age of the internet, because the what social media has done is it's exaggerated our contribution, that we all have a voice. Yeah, but it's a cacophony. I mean, there's so many voices out there. I've worked in some internet media marketing, and it's very interesting because it's like, you know, um, there's this idea that if you build it, they will come. Think about it. It's just like, get a website. Okay, get a website. How are you going to draw traffic to it? Oh, that's easy. SEO, search engine stuff. That's not so easy. Got to fight for keywords. You got to have clickbait titles. What if you have ethics? What if you're like, no, I don't feel like I should have to do that. Well, the algorithm disagrees with you, and you have to please the algorithm. I know this is all technobabble. I don't want to get too far into that, or into that at all, really. I just want to say that we we have to, the values conversation. We need to have that with ourselves. We need to have that with our friends and people we care about, and with our employer, because what we value is important. I know that's redundant, right? But do you seriously reflect the confusion that you have, or the stresses that you have? Is it a matter about something being important that shouldn't be as important? Or should there be other things in your life or in the way you go about things that um, are more valuable, and that you show are more valuable? So, for all of this judgment of dogmatic religious people, I think that in some ways they are trying to make an effort to reflect that this is important to them. When they're doing abortion stuff, as far as protesting it, that's important to them, the human life. You may disagree whether the mother has more rights, or less rights. I don't know, but it's just like, but they're standing up for something, and there is an importance for that, and for standing up. But it's also how we stand up. How do we show up? Like, one of my biggest disagreements of that is the people who and the people that protest is like that there isn't enough um, compassion and understanding for these mothers, and especially their larger context. If they really cared, they make an effort in a much broader sense. But I feel like they jump on a bandwagon, or it's an easy answer just to protest a thing like that. There's one of my favorite all-time shows is a show called Father Ted. It's from England in the early 90s, I think. And it's about these three priests, and there's this movie that's playing in the local theater, and they like hear that it's got some pretty racy things in it, and so they make up these placards and they go down there and they protest it, even though they've never seen the movie, which I think is hilarious. But they have these placards in it, and it says "Down with this sort of thing," because they really don't know what it is. And I think sometimes our stands are like this: "Down with this sort of thing." I recently got involved with my mother's care facility and was seriously, and I'm still kind of really looking at doing a complaint with the state as far as some of the care and the way things were done. And I understand my mother may not benefit, the damage is done, but it can help other people in this facility and other facilities if I do this. But I'm struggling because I have such a distrust of you know government forces. But I want to believe that what I'm going to do, what I'm going to make this effort and write and put all this stuff together. And I've done most of the work already, I think, and having conversations, trying to understand the people from these different facilities. But it's difficult because it's like, in some ways, I feel like I've already done the work because, I feel like I've gotten the attention of both a lot of people there, and I've relayed what I feel has been the issues, and so I think I've advanced the care and concern to the level that it can be, and I'm not sure how much more something on a state level would be effective, but I think it would right now. So that's why I'm serious. But these are things as a human, I would say as a Christian, I want to be involved in this, but just as a human. And this working it this way wasn't easy. It hasn't been easy, and I've gotten frustrated. I've gotten a little bit kind of testy at times, and had to be firm. But I feel like I've done pretty decently. But these are the things that when we look at an origin story and how they're treating my mother, she's my origin. That's who I came out of, where I came, right? It's the chief origin story. um, there is a sort of remembrance. What I'm getting at here, I'm starting to get into, is just like, rather than looking at a fall and addressing trauma, and I'm not against addressing trauma, but I think there's some doublespeak going on in that language or that environment, and I think it's too easily a buzzword to talk about trauma. Where if we talk about separation and remembering who we really are as divine beings, as I love how Michael Bickworth said that we are. How does he put it? We're rays of the divine light. We're hues of the divine. Snowflakes in a way, right? All of these things, and this is like when we show up, clean up, grow up, as Wilbur kind of took from somebody, I guess, but I learned it through Wilbur because he said it so many times. What we do is we are affirming not the separation game. We are affirming that we are all in this together, and that we are that we can find these places, these points of collaboration, and it's not always by being agreeable. This is something I've been thinking a lot of. George MacDonald, the Victorian author who was an inspiration to C.S. Lewis, who wrote a lot of stuff that people know of today, Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, fantasy stuff, basically. But he did write a good book called The Case for Christianity. I mean, I say good book, not a great book, as some would say. It had some salient points, but it also kind of glossed over some other ones and kind of, I don't know. Anyway, but MacDonald would say, if a person is not fit to be refused, so that's very different, right? Because how does that affirm that we're one? Well, it's just like, well, it doesn't say that we're not. If I'm refusing a person, I'm realizing we're still connected. we still may have to even work together as a coworker, as a relative, as a friend, or just as a stranger. Somebody, I have to pass every day. But when I refuse that person, what I'm doing is I'm kind of like, I guess, cauterizing. It would be the word maybe that comes to mind. Because we have parts in our body that are undesirable, parts of our body that maybe don't work as well. You have a gammy knee, or something like that, and we have to kind of live in a different relation to those parts of our body. And St. Paul says this in the New Testament. It's just like we're all parts of the body of Christ. I don't take that as the church per se, Christian churches. I take that as people who have that ethos and that belief structure of love that is pervasive. And I think I see that in progressive Judaism. I see it in many different faiths, actually. And even in the ones that claim one thing, I've known enough people in, those little groupings to say this, like, I don't know, whatever that grouping is, they're different. They function in this belief structure of love. And as John talks about in one of his epistles, he said, those who love are of God. And so that's not, holding hands and having a Coke, it's really, love is patient, love is kind. Some people who are aspiring into that patience and kindness and generosity of spirit, and those who worry about the fall and the cross and stuff, here's a different perspective. What if that was something that happened on a metaphysical level, in the sense that just like if something happens in our atmosphere, it changes, pollution. It changes the way we interact and we deal with our world, really, right? I remember when I first came over to the States and lived in Los Angeles and all that smog, and there was just days you couldn't go out because you were like hacking up, right? And so, to me, that was pollution. That's how I had to deal differently. And I deal differently with people in my world, in the world at large, because I understand that there is a tangledness and a brokenness to them. And they're definitely playing the separation game. But I know I want to remember the dignity of my creation and their creation, of who they are. I want to remember that the same cleansing influence of the Spirit that's always available to me is available to others as well. And not just through me, God, no. It's like available in so many ways, because God is working. God is working all around. To me, that's the importance of panentheism, is just like God being everywhere. It's just like you're not constricting and limiting God just because of, certain ritualistic or taste understandings, but that doesn't mean God is totally in it. It's more kind of like that, that Stoic thing of like God, the divine or God is interweaved into all things. But the relationship, the flow between those things, between us and them, between all these variables, that's a very different thing. And that's what we talk about when we talk about perspective, and kind of just the showing up, but also coming into this field of awareness. So the origin story really is coming into that awareness of love, that you are loved, that you have a certain dignity, and you have a certain agency, and so do others. And we want to encourage and affirm that as much as possible. And that is countering the separation game of our world. Thanks.